Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Central Virginia fishing report with Ethan Martin at TaleTellers Fly Shop. How you doing, Ethan?
I'm doing great today. How you doing today?
Just trying to stay out of trouble. I took a little bit of a look at your weather before we started recording, and it looks like it's solidly winter in Central Virginia.
Yeah, you got it. It's not too crazy cold, not too crazy warm, mid 40s, low 40s, and that range. And then across the board, we've had pretty good water flows. I know if you brought up like Virginia water data, would show that we've got in our streams, everything's running about average. So nothing's too low, nothing's too high, and it's all cold.
Yeah. So I guess the moral of the story, right, is to sleep late and go fish for trout.
Yeah, that's it. That's what's funny is I tell people that all the time. And then when I get my days to fish, I still end up leaving at like 8 in the morning.
Yeah, well, at least you can scout for 2 or 3 hours before the bite turns on.
Yeah, and freeze. That's been the thing. It's some people don't think about it, but the streams up in the mountains are going to be a little bit colder, especially in the morning. But then we had a little bit of like faint snow the past couple of past weekend, I guess Saturday. And so a lot of that snow, I actually went up in the mountains yesterday, and it was still all snowed over. I mean, ice because it was all packed down. So those streams were real cold, and we still ended up catching a handful of fish towards the midday, and they ate dry flies. So it was a pretty cool experience. I mean, rookies will eat dries most any day of the year if you put them in the right places. But it is a cool thing to go up in January against all conventional wisdom, throwing a dry fly and having brook trout still eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a really good question talking about winter fishing for trout from Gregory. And he's in eastern West Virginia, says he's in medical school and likes to fly fish kind of to get away from it all. And he's having some issues targeting fish in the deeper pools. And, I infer from his question, he told me he's fishing really small stuff like midges. And so he really wants to know, how do you get to the bottom with a rig like that? Or is it better to upsize your flies and try to get fish to move that way?
Yeah. So if I'm fishing with you, what I would recommend would be two things. Like first, I'll just address the depth issue, because to me, it sounds like there's two different issues kind of going on if you're not able to, one, catch fish, but two is just when you're in those pools trying to get a fly to the bottom, it does require more weight. So split shot does become either split shot or a really heavy fly becomes what you need. And so just like yesterday, there was a hole that we fished that is stupid deep. I mean, but it's like in a canyon. And so when you're fishing it, it's probably like 6 to 8 foot deep. And so in all reality, you're not going to be able to get to the bottom of that with a traditional fly rod setup. So how we address it is I put on a really heavy tungsten headed fly. And it's just a fabulous fly called a mop fly, and the stock fish, a stock stream. So with the mop fly, I kind of knew this is a giant gob of meat essentially. So on this stock section that we were fishing, I would cast up and I was just watching my indicator. And every time that my indicator would float back, and obviously no fish would eat it, if you didn't see it like twitch or wiggle or move or do anything ever, then that automatically tells me that my fly isn't down deep enough to where it's even bumping the water occasionally or bumping the bottom of the river occasionally. So how I change that is nothing's eating the mop fly. I put on one split shot, I cast up again, and then watched it, and then caught a fish on it. So that one change of depth of just adding one split shot to it did make an adjustment, and we ended up catching a fish. So made a couple more casts, didn't catch anything. So then I thought, let me get it even deeper just to see, because still my indicator was telling me it was never moving, not for a fish and not for striking the bottom even. So that tells you you're nowhere close to the bottom. So I cut off the old mop fly, and then I had a really heavy tungsten headed fly that I make. And it's a perdigon, And so you take that thing, and the head on the ones that I tie is like a really big bead. I mean, it's basically like, I think, if I'm thinking right, and if you're a fly tyer, this makes sense to you, but it's like a 3.8 millimeter bead. And so tied that on, and within 2 casts, we had caught 2 more fish. So it all just boils down to, the depth of where you're fishing. So to draw it back, if you're fishing really small flies, a lot of times it is difficult to get really small flies down deep because they don't weigh much, and so then you have to compensate by using split shot. But the flip side to that is, in our Virginia streams, I rarely fish midges. And I know that's kind of unconventional wisdom, because when you look at stuff online, a lot of people say, one of the top 3 patterns to use through the winter is the zebra midge, which is true. I mean, I have some in my box, but on the majority of our freestone rivers, I'll say that, on our freestone rivers, so places that aren't tailwaters like the Jackson or the Smith or a spring creek, if the river is coming out of the mountain and it's just a free flowing stream, then I pretty much don't fish midges. And the reason for that is it doesn't seem to be necessary to catch fish. So I'll fish bigger patterns, which again is somewhat unconventional. Doesn't go by the books that you read, but like a size 10, a size 12 girdle bug, or like a patch rubber legs, what they're called. You'll still catch fish through the winter on those things, because a lot of it boils to the depth that you're fishing. And when you look at a pattern like a patch rubber legs, we commonly would assume that fly looks like a stonefly. But to a fish, it might look just enough like a crayfish or a hellgrammite or something like that, that is just on the bottom of the river. So those fish are used to picking off whatever sort of foods that they can find. And so if you're fishing a midge consistently and you're not catching fish, it could be, one, because you're not down deep enough, or it could be, two, is that fish just wants to find a bigger meal to consume other than a midge, because when it's as cold as it is right now, you almost have to like bounce the flies off the fish's nose for them to eat it, if that makes sense. So going back to like where we fished yesterday, the place is like 6 to 8 foot deep in the center of the hole. So off of those edges, if I'm fishing a midge and that midge is coming off, let's say even 4 foot deep, and the trout's going to have to come off the bottom 2 foot to consume a size 18 or a size 20 midge. In my experience, that just doesn't happen as often unless there's an active midge hatch, or maybe on a tailwater. So tailwaters to me are going to be a completely different story. But in a lot of the streams that you're probably going to be fishing, you're not going to be experiencing that sort of a hatch where fish are just keyed in on eating little tiny midges. So I would say try a couple different patterns. Ones I'd recommend would be the girdle bug or the patch rubber leg. You can get them with as heavy a tungsten bead as you can find. Other things like a Prince nymph, or a pattern I talk about a lot, which is the hot bead Prince, which is basically just a Prince nymph with a orange fluorescent bead on it. So try stuff that's a little bit more leaning towards the attractor realm. And if you're still not catching fish on that, then I would say change your approach to how you're fishing that pool. Because that is another thing that made a difference for us yesterday, is in the canyon that we were fishing. We, at first, it was cold, so we were trying to get out of the stream to fish it. And so we were almost on like the complete left bank casting out. And what I was finding was, as I was casting out, there was just no way that my nymph was getting anywhere close to the bottom, because the way I was casting upstream, it basically put like an immediate drag on my fly, which, one, fish aren't going to be as actively eating a fly that has drag on it. And two, depth really does matter. So I told the guy I was with, I was like, I think the only way that we're going to be able to really catch fish is if we go back into the water, you stand directly downstream, cast as far upstream as we can cast, and then let this whole rig just kind of sink, go down in the water column, and come back to us. And it was as soon as we did that we started picking up fish. So there's just the 3 things I would say is, one, you focus on your depth. So that might be adding a heavier fly, maybe split shot. 2 is consider changing flies to something bigger, because that will increase weight and it'll increase the potential for the fish to want to move for it because it's a little bit bigger of a meal. And then the third thing would be look at your approach to those pools that you're fishing. Because if you're trying to fish it, fishing from upstream, downstream, or at a weird angle off to the left or right of the stream, a lot of times if you do go to the back of the hole, it will enable you to have better dead drift, and it'll also help the flies get deeper because you do have a true dead drift, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of things within that one question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only kind of trick I would add to that is, one way to know when you're indicator fishing that you're getting down is to always remember that the water on the bottom of the river is slower than the water on top. Yep. And so if you watch your indicator and try to judge its speed in relation to like leaves and bubbles on the top of the water, and if your indicator is moving faster than the bubbles, you're not on the bottom.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, that's for sure. Or you're dragging hardcore.
Yeah, and so that's the trick, is to make sure that indicator is moving kind of at or a little bit slower than the flow of the water. And that'll also, Gregory, give you a little bit of a visual cue that you're down, right?
Yep. And it's a common question, actually, that I've had in the shop is, what size fly you should be fishing through the winter. Because, like I said, if you read articles or if you read books, people are always talking about, matching the hatch and that sort of thing, which is going to be true on your streams out west, particularly tailwaters, spring creeks, that sort of thing. But then, like I said, I end up a lot of times on our freestone stuff, just kind of fishing Frenchies in a size 14 or 12. And if you're not catching a fish on a Frenchie in a size 14, 12, or 16, then it has to do with something else, because those flies on our freestone rivers catch fish year round. I mean, I've had year after year after year where that's just a consistent producer of fish.
Yeah, absolutely. And, folks, last time Ethan announced that the prize that we were going to draw for, and I think if I remember correctly, right, it was some store swag and $100 gift card. Isn't that right, Ethan?
Yep, you got it.
Yep. And so I'll announce the winner, and the winner is Jack Bassett. And Jack, I will get your contact information to Ethan, and he'll reach out to you and hook you up. And, folks, we love questions at the Articulate Fly. You can email them to us, send them to us on our Facebook, our Instagram page. If we read your question, we're starting another year, I'll send you some Articulate Fly swag, and you'll get into a drawing for something cool from the shop at the end of the season. And Ethan, before I let you hop and go grab dinner, why don't you let folks know where to find the shop online, where you are in downtown Lynchburg, and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so we're located on Commerce Street in downtown Lynchburg. So that's basically right on the James River. It's just one street up from it. There's a lot of cool stuff to do around here throughout the day. So it's a great, weekend trip or weekend getaway. A lot of coffee shops, fun stuff. And then you can come and chat with me. And then if you can't make it to the shop, other ways that you can get in touch or, look at products or that sort of thing is through our website, which is TaleTellersVA.com, which is like TaleTellersVirginia.com, and or Instagram, Facebook, all of those ways. And we're pretty active on all the social media platforms. So if you have a question, you can always send us a question through that route, and we can get in touch with you directly. And like you've said many times, I really enjoy the teaching aspect and helping people get more out of their time on the water. So if there's any way that I can help, just shoot me a message.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, you owe it to yourself. If you can sneak out and catch a few, you should do it. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Ethan.
Tight lines.